Welcome back to Fuel Your Life podcast. That is find, unleash, and elevate your leadership to create a loving, impactful, freeing energy within you and around you. I am your host, John Troutman, alongside my co-host, Charles Draper. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you this morning?
Man, I'm doing good. It's weird for me to still call you Charles Draper. Like, it's always been Draper, so that's what it's going to be on this podcast. I can't do
Yeah,
anything else.
yeah.
So,
Calling you John is odd too, because
yeah,
Troutman, we normally go by last names,
we
so
do. We do.
try to be more formal and adultish.
Oh, yeah. Adultish is overrated, though, isn't it?
It sure
Uh,
is.
no. Well, today we're going to dive in. We're going to start off the bat, we're going to talk about vision. And I want to not even cast a vision, but talk about the problem that I've noticed and why it's like, man, let's go ahead and dive in and talk about this topic of vision. So I was at a meeting the other day with a bunch of different guys, really leaders in their communities and their jobs and their families, great men. And the question was asked, well, how many of you have actually developed a mission for your life? And like a few of them raised their hand, had actually even considered it, written it down, but only a few. And I was sitting there like, man, isn't that like, isn't that one of the big issues we face is we just don't have clarity about where we want to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that clarity starts with cultivating vision, whether that be in for yourself personally, whether it be for your organization, whether it be for your family. I mean, you could lay out all kinds of different places, but the vision is what sets a direction. So we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about vision, and I'm not going to talk very much. I think I'm just going to let you handle all of it, dude.
I don't know
Because
about
we've
that.
talked about this so much. I'm like, oh man, this is such good stuff. So, but we'll start off. I just want to ask the question: what is a vision?
Well, I think it's important to know that, I mean, until you can articulate your why and where you're going, you're not going to have a following, right? So, if you look at a vision, I think a lot of times we get the mission and vision kind of mixed together, and they're very different. A vision is where you want to go. So I think that's important to know, like where you want to go. A vision shouldn't be what you've already arrived at or what you're already doing. It's where do you want to go, and what does that look like? I think that's super important. I think if anybody's going to follow a leader into battle, they got to know that they have a vision of where they're heading, what that's going to look like, and it's important for any organization. I do think that sometimes we create these vision statements and we plaster them all over the wall and they're there, but we don't really live it and don't know it and we don't believe it. Or people in the organization, like, it means nothing. It's meaningless. And
Mm-hmm.
that I believe is a true sign that an organization is going to fail.
Yep. Oh yeah.
So also, if people in the organization can't recite it, they don't know it. It's got to be clear. It's got to be concise. There's so many things to your vision statement. What does that look like? And yeah, it's pretty important.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I I read a book recently, and one phrase in there, and it's actually stuck with me. But he was just saying, what if the next sentence you say out of your mouth, you just start with MLK's famous words, "I have a dream," and then fill in the blank. And vision and dream, they might be slightly different, but they're kind of along the same lines almost of you're trying to paint the picture, really. I mean, think of yourself as, I guess, Picasso. You're trying to paint the picture of your organization of what could be. Like a vision ought to be so big that it seems almost impossible, almost daunting, but not quite there. Like it's if we work together, we could do it kind of idea mentality. Um, but I mean, you said it. If it's not creating change or movement, it's not doing anything. Like if people don't know it, what good is it? I'll use the example of the book business that I had, and we shut down this past year. And I can't tell you how many times I tried to cultivate some sort of vision, but there was just always a disconnect. And always a disconnect, one, because I wasn't connected to it and I didn't have any vision for what I was really doing. I mean, my main vision for that business was to help create an income for me. And then my brother, who was also working with me, was super disconnected from it too. because he didn't have any vision for it. It's just like show up and this is what I have to do. And it's, it was just grinding and grinding and grinding. And it was, not worth it because there was no vision behind the actual business.
Yeah.
So.
No, and I would say too that so as a leader, that communication of that is super important. Your leadership team, the team that is moving that forward, because I do believe that no one person can move a team forward. I think you can have the head of that team that can move that, but you got to have a team of individuals that buy into that. But how are you as a leader going to articulate it, keep it at the forefront, and constantly move people in that direction? And that to me has been a struggle. All right, like it's easy to create the vision statement and then put it out there, and then to onboard new people. And are you constantly revisiting what that looks like? And maybe this is a good example, maybe not, but recently my daughter plays travel softball, and she also plays basketball. But like I kind of give this example: if a girl joins the team but never plays in the game, right? She's coming to practice every day. She's showing up. She's doing that, but she never gets to see the game results. She never gets that game time experience. Really, like the vision of the team is, well, we want to grow athletes. We want to grow students. We want to grow just great individuals, because I think you can learn a ton through sports, but also you want to win ball games. I mean, maybe people disagree with me, but if I'm playing a sport, my vision is we want to win. We want to be the best. We want to win. But through that process, we grow great individuals. But if you never get to experience the game time experience, you never get that camaraderie, are you going to keep coming to practice every day? Are you going to keep putting forth your best effort in practice? So I don't know. I kind of give that example because it's I wasn't planning on that this morning, but just as I think about that, it's hard whenever you're not in the trenches walking and doing that vision, and that game time experience and going through the ups and downs, the highs and lows are super important. So, and I've seen some girls that have just shown up for practice at times, and for whatever reason, they haven't been able to go to games, or I've heard people say, well, I'm going to go practice with this great team. I haven't made it, but I'm not going to go to the games. So what does that look like? And what does, like, how do you move that person forward? Right. Like if I'm not playing in the game, I'm probably not fully vested in practice. I'm just going to be honest with you. Maybe that's a bad mentality on my part, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely you. No, I mean, you're saying it. Buy-in starts with ownership. And that's actually, I should steal that phrase. That's really good. Buy-in starts with ownership. Like you give people ownership, and all of a sudden they're starting to buy into what you're wanting to accomplish. And that's huge, 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 huge.
There's a quote that I have here from Stephen Covey, and there's a training that we went through in our school district talking about the 4 disciplines of leadership, and it says if a clear and compelling purpose exists, people will volunteer their best efforts. So I'll say that again: if a clear and compelling purpose exists, people will volunteer their best efforts. And I think as a leader, that's what we're charged to do, right? Like we have to give that clear and compelling purpose. And then the individuals around, they're going to give us their best, especially if they believe in it and they want to be part of that and they want to champion that, then they're going to follow.
Yeah. And I think to go alongside that, words really do matter when you're talking about a vision. Most of the time, and I hope we kind of start dealing with the process, but I don't think we're going to cover this all in this episode. So just, fasten your seatbelt. Hopefully, if you're driving and listening to this, you're already fastened, but fasten your seatbelt. We're going to have a couple episodes kind of talking about this, but I think we often will develop the initial vision, and it's very wordy. And it's almost like you need to develop that initial vision, but then you need to develop the phrases around that everybody in your organization will understand and know. Everybody in your family will understand and know, because the vision may be too much to be talking about. So, talking about in a regular conversation, but just to use the phrase we just used, like buy-in starts with ownership. You could say that anytime. So you see something happening and, oh yeah, buy-in starts with ownership. So creating the phrases even around your vision, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But the other thing is with words, I think we need to understand what we're defining. I've
Yeah.
seen so many visions. Actually, talking to a friend starting a new role, and I asked him what the vision of his organization was, and he's like, "Oh, I have no idea. And I hate visions." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well,
But hey,
great,
but John, let me ask you this question: why do people hate visions?
great question." And I mean, I think because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't resonate at all. And the reason it doesn't resonate most of the time is because you're not defining the impact that you're actually trying to have.
Yeah.
Like
And
you're not. Go
a lot
ahead.
of times people they use it as a checkbox. Like, oh, we have this because we have to have it, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't really leverage the power of it. Maybe they don't understand it. Maybe they, for whatever reason. But I mean, there's power behind it. But if you're doing it just because that's what everybody else does, then that's the wrong case, right? So I know before, like I would get tired of mission and vision, but then I kind of unlock this key to it. Like ours here at Bethlehem Elementary School is to gauge, equip, and inspire students to love learning, to lead, and to thrive.
Mm.
I mean, it's pretty basic, and I use those words all the time. I talk, how are we creating? How are kids like? Do kids love learning? Like in this space, how are we creating leaders, and are they thriving? Like those are three pieces that I always use. Like we always use that language. Are we engaging, equipping, and inspiring students? Like, and if not, what do we need to do better? And so, but those are tenets we constantly come back to. But it's language that I use regularly, but also is sprinkled throughout our organization. And so there's no way that it doesn't stay at the forefront of what we do, because it's just like you said, it's just constant language that we're embedding in everything we do. So language is super important, and I think it embeds into it. But we all know the long vision statement that nobody knows, that old Papa created back in 1940, that's
Right.
outdated and not up to date. And we just keep it there because it's going to hurt somebody's feelings if we take it down or if we change it. And there's some visions that are timeless too. So I don't know. I hear that a lot. Vision, mission, here we go. But if you're really tapping into it, it can be powerful, I think.
Yep.
Sorry,
Oh man.
I interrupted
So
your thought there,
well,
but
no, it was a great interruption, because I even sit here and think. I just think back to like one accomplishment in your life, the one significant accomplishment that you had in your life. I'll go to, excuse me, but I'll go to graduating seminary. Seminary was a tough time. It took me 5.5 years to get through. It was a long degree. And we had our first kid in the middle of it. We were living in Colorado. It was super expensive. I'm in school. At the end, I was in school full time. So we're living off my wife's income, trying to get through. Like it was a tough experience. And you want to know why I got through? I never articulated it, but I had a vision, right? Like even though we don't articulate it all the time, there's vision behind any significant accomplishment we make in our lives. And most of the time we keep it on the subconscious level. We don't bring it to the forefront. But when you start bringing it to the forefront, that's what moves everybody. We're getting ahead of ourselves like crazy. This is why you need one right here. It creates movement. That's what creates movement. No matter what you're doing, if you have a vision, you're moving. If you're moving somewhere, you have a vision. You just may not know what it is.
yeah, that's good. That's good. No,
Yeah.
I mean, it does. It propels you forward,
Mm.
and it keeps you laser focused, right? Because say you have 100 people in your organization. Well, let's just take your family, for example. I have 5 individuals in my family. And if we're all working towards our own thing, but we have a vision statement of, as a family, we're going to love the Lord, we're going to love each other, and we're going to, I don't know, I haven't come up with a vision statement, obviously, for my family, but whatever that might be, right? And we get off base because we're just selfish. I mean, humans are naturally can be selfish, right? Like it's all about us. So, and then we're all about, well, this daughter wants her TV. This daughter wants her snack. This daughter wants this. I want this. My wife wants this. And we're all pulling in opposite directions. Well, are we working towards our vision? What does that look like as a family? So you have that vision because it's kind of like it's your North Star, right? It's the thing you constantly come back to when things get a little scattered and things get frayed out a little bit. And it just kind of recenters and re-guides everything and brings it all back. And that's what I love about it, because at any point, if we try to make a major decision, whether it's as a family or organization, if it doesn't align with our vision, then why are we doing it?
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty basic, but if your vision is that compelling and that on point, then why not, right?
Yep. Yeah. I love you define it as the North Star. I actually said give boundaries is kind of the way I was thinking of it, but actually I would say even the mission is what maybe even provides the boundaries, or your values, one of those two. But the direction is really set by the vision, the North Star. And you think of, defining as the North Star. Before there was GPS and all this, people actually used the stars. Can you believe that? People use the stars to navigate.
I would be lost.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll go out on my front porch and just look up, and the Big Dipper usually sits like right in front of my porch, and so I just look up at the Big Dipper. So I might be able to navigate slightly just based off where the Big Dipper is, but overall I would be super lost, but that's how people used to navigate. They understood the stars so well. So that's what you're saying. I mean, it's, to bring it in today's terms, it's the GPS, it's the destination of where we're trying to get to. By creating that vision, you have that set direction. And how many people, I mean, this day and age, if you don't have a GPS, you're done. If you're trying to get to a destination that you've never actually been there before, you don't have a stand a chance. I'll digress, but that's what I think it does.
And two things, like I think it's important to identify the difference between your mission and your vision. And I got this from Covey. So he's a lot smarter than what I am. So I like to still think
pretty smart.
People that are smarter than me. But your mission is why you exist. Your vision is where you're going. And I think it's important, like to know that those are the differentiating factors between the two. So your mission should say, this is why we exist, and here's our visions where we want to go. And I think a lot of times we just have a mission without a vision, or we have a vision without a mission. So I think both those things are super important, because they play in tandem. And then your core values. I mean,
yep.
You got to know what your core values are, and everybody has to be on board with them. If you're going to be a bank robber, your mission and vision and core values are going to look much different than being an educator or a campus minister or a police officer, right? Like, I mean, it depends on what field you're in, what your mission, vision, and core value is going to look like. So I'm not advocating for bank robbers, but just an example. It's going to look different depending on where you're at and what you're doing. If I'm a single guy, my mission, vision, and core values look a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Those things change depending on where you're at in life, and I believe that. So
yeah. And I want to go back to a point you just made, but you've done this for your organization. You've done this for several organizations at this point, developing the mission and the vision, and you've really done it well. From the sounds of it, I'm not a part of the organization, but sounds like it.
That's kind.
Yeah. But at the same time, you look at your family, it's like, I've never actually really laid out the vision for my family. And I just recently was convicted by the same thing. I was laying out a vision for me personally for where I'm going. And I was like, why don't I do this for my family? And now with a 5 and a 3-year-old, which is how old my boys are right now, it's hard to necessarily get them to buy in. But my wife and I, we can be bought into it. And you know what? I made it. My wife was not at a point where she really wanted to talk about it, because she's 8 months pregnant right now. And so I just went ahead and made it and filled it out. And then I showed up, and we were talking the other day, and she's like, yeah, that was great that you did that, but you didn't really talk to me about it. You just showed up with it. I'm like, oh, shoot. And the whole point of, if you're creating a vision, whether it be for your family or anything, bring people in.
Yeah.
Like, people love to have this conversation. They love to sit here and say, where do we want to go together? Buy-in creates ownership.
Yeah. And if they're not part of it, then they're probably less likely to buy in, because they're going to be like, well, that's what he came up with.
Mm-hmm.
So having that core at the table, right? And it may not be everybody. Like, if you have an organization of 100 people, you don't want all 100 to be, they may not
Right.
be able to be
Oh,
part.
yes.
They might be able to. You may be able to listen to their feedback through some, surveys, those kind of things, and pull from keywords and phrases. Have your core team so that as they go out to their departments, they can say, hey, this is a team effort. So I've actually thought about this, and something that we say a lot in our family is, God, family, friends, and play. Like those are kind of the order that of importance of things, and that's just what we land on. And we haven't written it down, but my girls can tell you those things, and they remind us often. And so here recently, like we had we had some commitments at church that we had committed to, and we had pre-committed to them, and we had ball practice, and my older daughter is really into softball. I help coach, so I love it too. I'm super competitive, but whenever we listed out those things, God comes first, and those commitments that we make, and we committed to something Monday through Thursday, actually Sunday through Thursday at church. And so we came down to it, and guess what? She missed 2 days of practice. She had a tournament that weekend. She had to sit out the first part of the game, the first game we had. But like we knew, like as a family, like that's exactly what we had committed to doing. And because of that, we had to follow through with it, and it was hard. And I told my daughter, I said, you know what? A lot of times talk's cheap, right? You can say you're going to do something, but then whenever the rubber meets the road, you're really going to show up and do that. And it was tough. It's probably harder for me than her because I don't know, but really like looking at that, once you create that, sticking to it. So I'm excited to actually work through a family vision statement. Vision statement, because that's on my list too. You kind of challenged me to do that a couple of weeks ago, and just haven't made time. But maybe over this Thanksgiving break, we'll make some time to sit down as a family and do that. What I want something to be. I got a 9-year-old, I got a 6-year-old, and 2-year-old. Now 2-year-old, she probably I know she won't, but that the other two can buy into it. Like I'd love for them to say, "Hey, mom, dad, we can't do that. Remember, this is what we stand for." Like just that accountability. Honestly, I think it's powerful. I think it's cool. And I appreciate you bringing that to the forefront of my mind.
Yeah, well, I just think we overlook that. I was in the same boat, so hopefully anybody who listens to this and they're like, oh yeah, I've never done that either. This is not a, be critical on yourself or anything. It's, hey, there's a challenge for you. Like, do it. We have families. Families want to be led too. But we're about 20 minutes into this podcast. That has flown by. All right. So we want to try and keep these relatively short, and let's move on to actually making the practical steps. What do you need to do if you're saying, man, I don't have a vision, or our organization doesn't have a vision or a good one? We're going to create one. What steps do people need to take?
Well, really, you got to come together and say, where do you want to go? I mentioned that earlier. Where do you want to go? And I think I have a few bullet points here and a few things that I'm going to pull out of this training piece, because I come back to this. But it says effective leaders create a vision of where they are going and why. They are able to link to an aspirational purpose that inspires people to think bigger and find meaning in their work, especially during difficult times. So whenever I talk about peaks and valleys a lot, I talk about it with our softball team, I talk about it with any sports team I'm on. And then I'm constantly revisiting that in my head. Like in life, we're all going to go through peaks and valleys. So whenever you're going through that valley, is that vision something inspirational enough and on point to where it can help pull you through that valley? Whether that's in your marriage, like are you going through a valley in your marriage, and do you have that vision? Do you have that those items that you're going to hang on to in an organization? Maybe you're going through reorganizing. Maybe there's a rift going on. Maybe it's a budget crisis. Like, do you have that vision that no matter what goes on, you can go back to it and say, this is still where we're going. It may be tough. So how do we carry through it?
So let me piggyback off that, because I think if you don't even have a vision, when you start going through that valley, when you start going through the hard times, the difficult times, that's when things start getting clear. You know, like you don't have to be going through a valley, but if they're not clear and you start going through a valley, that's when things will get clear if you want them to.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that emphasis on if you want them to. But that's been 2023 for us, and I won't go too much into that, but it's been a long valley. And you talk about things getting clear. In those times, the Lord meets you in a new way, in a fresh way, that things just get clear, priorities get straightened out, and you know exactly how to move forward. You know, I mean, I shouldn't say exactly how to move forward, but you know where you want to go. Like, you know the direction, you get clear on that. And it's during those times that one thing I'm going to kind of go a different direction a little bit, but I think once we lay out a vision, we'll have it, it'll be set, and it'll never change. And I think that couldn't be further from the truth. I think it will often change, maybe in small ways, but you're going to be changing it often just to create the impact that it's supposed to create. But part of that is you're going to get clear on dark times. It's going to be like, okay, now I know how this needs to change. Yeah. And that's, I mean, the purpose of those times are for that, I think. And part of the reason God brings us to those times is to say again and again, like, hey, where are you? What's your priorities?
Yeah. And I love it. Like, I think that's great. I love talking about peaks and valleys because it goes back to the refining process, right? Like whenever you're forging a knife, a sword, that's not my expertise, but I've seen a video or two, right? Like you go in the fire, you pull it out. It's not pretty. It's ugly, right? But you forge it and you work it and you work that metal, and then you grind on it and you get all the excess stuff that's just brittle and that needs to be taken off. But like you go through those valleys and one of two things happen. I believe you come out on the other side stronger, or you sit in the middle of it and you just sit there. And I've been in valleys and I've had other people come alongside me and help carry me out of them. People that the Lord's put in my path. I've had people pray me through those valleys. But like the scariest thing is to get in the valley and to not have a vision or a direction. And so I just encourage you, what does that vision look like? What is that North Star? And I just, for me, it's the Lord. He carries me through it all. And I can't talk about this without bringing that in because, without that hope, I don't have anything. But you also got to have that community and know where you're going, know your why. So I like that. I like that example.
Yeah. It's good. Yeah. Man, we got a lot to cover, and too much in this little time, but I want to say, like, even kind of a rabbit hole here, but if you are following Christ, and we both are, we believe he invites us to be great leaders. But I think we often think of this as like, oh man, we follow Christ so that we can escape the troubles. But Jesus said the exact opposite. I mean, John 16:33 talks about, take heart, for I have overcome the world. Like, not so that you escape them, so that you go through them.
Yeah.
And Jesus was always about, I mean, when he talked about kingdom, it was talking about bringing the kingdom here. Jesus wants to make this world better. We don't think about that, but Jesus wants to make this world better. Yeah, one day, we'll be, heaven and earth will meet and all that. But right now, Jesus wants to make this world better. That's what we get to be invited into. That's the vision that we can have of following Jesus, is like, man, we get to make this world better. And you can do that by being an educator. You can do that by being a campus minister. You can do that by being a dad, by being a mom. You can do that, I mean, in numerous ways. If you're single, you could do that by just showing up at work and leading from where you are.
Yeah.
But that's the invitation we get.
And if it was easy, everybody would do it.
That's right.
Like, leading is not easy. What Christ did on the cross for us, there's nothing that compares, right? Like, we're not called to a life of ease, but through that we become blessed tenfold.
Oh yeah.
I believe like we're called to do hard things. I tell my kids that all the time. Like we're
It's one
called
of our
to do
mottos.
things, and I believe too that a lot of times, and even with my kids, I'm passionate about my family. John, I know you are as well, but like I hear people all the time say, "Oh man, our kids are going to go through this time, and it's going to be hard, and the culture and the economy and all this stuff." No, like I refuse to say that. Like what I say is
Amen.
they're made for a time such as this. And it's our job as the mothers and fathers in the household to raise them up in such a manner that they can go out and lead, inspire others, and be that example. And so I don't waver and shrink back and feel sorry for my kids. I look at my kids and I say, no, like Evelyn Draper, Hadley Draper, and Elizabeth Draper was made for such a time that they're going to grow up in. It's my job as their father to lead in such a way that whenever they hit that space head on, that they don't cower back, that they don't, that they have all the tools they need to push through it and to push into what they're getting into. And like that's what excites me. Like I refuse to hear the other because I brought them into this world. The Lord's blessed me with them. We went through a miscarriage. We should have 4, but we don't. But the Lord's blessed us through that too. Like, I mean, we're just, I don't know, like that. I can talk about that all day, and it gets me excited, it gets me passionate. But like, our children are made for such a time as this. But how are you leading them? I just,
which, yeah, that means you and I were made for such a time as this too. Like, so, boy, I wasn't really planning on sharing this, but this year, part of the reason it's been such a valley is we found out both of our boys have been diagnosed with muscular dystrophy. It's just a diagnosis right now. Like they run, they jump, they play, like they have tons of energy. But man, you talk about every little thing now we're focused on and walking through that. And here we are with 2 boys who seem healthy, like by crazy chance being diagnosed with this and having to show up every day and say they were made for such a time and such a situation as this. And it changes the way, like, I mean, some people might even be like, you might be too hard on them. And I'm like, I want them to be tough. They're going to have to face tough stuff. Maybe they never show signs of this. That's possible in this disease. We don't really know what it's going to look like for them. And maybe they don't, but they're still going to have to face tough stuff, right? Like I want them to know that, hey, this might hurt. Your legs might hurt after jumping on the trampoline for X amount of time. Okay, go do it. Like it. And that's I don't know, it's maybe a lame example right now, but that's the world we live in. And my wife and I is like, we want to build them up for such a time, such a situation as this, because they need to be tough. That's what it's going to take.
Yep. That's good. I mean,
and so, yeah, I love that you said that.
No, it's, and I know we kind of got off a little bit, but I don't think we did, right? Like,
no, that's what a vision does.
You got to drive it, right? You got to drive it home. And I just, I don't know. I think if you don't have a vision for your family, that's my challenge. I hope by next time we do a podcast or the next couple of months, maybe I'll get on and I'll share kind of what that process looked like. Because, or even just what our vision looks like. So I guess whoever's listening, I mean, what's it going to hurt, right? Like, why not? Why wouldn't you sit down with your family and cast a vision? What does that look like? And just talk through, where do you want to go? Like, what are the key tenets to your family? And it could look different for each family. I'm a Christian, so that looks different. You may not be. And so what does that look like for you? And I don't know. I think it's super important in your organization to do the same thing.
Yeah. So we'll leave with a little bit of a few questions for our leaders if they want to wrestle with this, that I think will help you when you're setting the vision. We actually talked about this a little bit on our introductory episode, but starting with the end in mind. All right. So with the family, we're going to use the family as the example since that's where we've gone. But after your family's gone, aka your kids have left the house. Well, really, you should even think, if you're married, your spouse and you, all right, y'all are gone, 3 to 5 years after you're gone. How do you want people to talk about you?
Yeah. And I'll add, like, maybe even simplify that. What legacy do you want to leave?
Mm-hmm. It's exactly the question. What legacy do you want to leave?
When you're gone, what legacy do you want to leave? And with who do you want to leave it? I mean, I'll be honest with you on that. Cause like, I hope I leave a legacy. I know I'm going to leave a legacy in my family. I hope I also leave it in my work.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I want to leave it with my kids.
Yep.
But once again, you may be single. So what does that look like for you?
Right. I challenge our students, like we were talking about relationships the other day, and said, start with the end in mind. Define the impact you want to create, which goes back to the second question. What impact do you want to create from your family? What impact do you want to create? But define that impact before you go into a relationship. Define that impact for yourself, and then be willing to have that conversation.
That's good.
And if you're in line, then continue on. If not, like, why would you stay in a relationship? Anyways, that was for my students. But define the impact you want to create, whether that be through your family, whether that be through you personally. Define that impact. So the other question, I love this question, but what is it that you talk about your voice changes? And think about that with your family. Talk about that with your spouse. Talk about that with your kids if they're old enough to have those passions. But what actually changes where you get excited that your voice can't help but change?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I had one of those experiences in this podcast, if you didn't notice. But
I noticed.
it happened, like, really, like, and what gets you pepped up? What gets you jazzed? Like, what gets you moving? What do you just get pumped about talking about? And figure out that space and be in it. Be in it more times than not.
Yeah. And I mean, to kind of piggyback off that as we end this podcast, but is get help too, because that question stemmed from me actually meeting with a coach and was talking through just where we were, where I was headed, and he said, dude, why are you doing this? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? You just started talking about basically leadership, about personal development, and your whole voice changed, and you're not going anywhere in that. I was like, whoa. And it's changed the way I do campus ministry. It's changed the way I'm heading now. Like, it's changed the vision of my life, all because of that one question. But he pointed it out. I would have never noticed it. So get help. Get help. Ask people these questions about yourself. So
it's good. It's good stuff, man. I'll tell you, this has been good.
This has been real good.
I hope that people that listen to this will take something out of it, and if not, I got a lot out of it. It's always fun to talk and just to dig into this kind of content, for sure.
Yep. All right, the challenge: go create a vision for your family if you have a family. If not, create it for you personally. That's the challenge.
Yep.
All right, dude. This has been a pleasure. We're gonna end the recording officially. So,
all right.
Thanks, guys. Fuel your life. We'll talk to y'all later.